How could you? Jin hissed, while cleaning up the mess on the floor with a move of his hand. The shattered dishes and spilled food vanished into nothingness within a second. Now she's even more danger than before. What if Namjoon rips her apart when he finds out? He pointed towards you. Not only do we lose a meal, but Namjoon might break when he realizes he killed her. Before you could inquire why Namjoon would give a damn about killing you, a useless human, Jimin got up and stepped in front of you. She deserved the truth. He growled back. Plus, sooner or later she would have found out anyway. She's not stupid like the others. He turned towards you as if to support his point. Who have figured out so far? You looked up, unsure about what to say, but when Jin nodded with a sigh, you straightened your back. Yoongi was the first, you answered quietly. Then Jin, and now Namjoon. Jimin huffed. See, Jin? He continued, a bit calmer. It's no use. Jin's eyes were dark and focused on you. She's been here too long. He mumbled more to himself than anyone else. She might as well not be eaten at this point. The younger demon stiffened. Are you nuts? Namjoon will kill us if he finds out that we are hesitant to devour her. The fact alone that Yoongi saved her has him all worked up. He'll kill us. He turned towards you with a somewhat apologetic expression. And sorry, Mia. I'd rather kill one human than be killed myself. Are you sure about that? The voice coming from the door made the three of you look up. Yoongi entered slowly, wiping his hands on what appeared to be a kitchen towel. Jin took a deep breath. Are you alright? The elder demon chuckled. I'm fine, don't worry. His eyes turned to you. How are you, Mia? He asked while approaching. How's the chest pain? You rubbed the area that had stung before feeling for any pain left. It's alright at the moment. You then smiled in relief. Yoongi hummed. Then it worked, he said. Jimin frowned. Worked? He inquired. What did? Yoongi sat down next to you and Jimin, his firm glance seeming to pierce right through you. When He hesitated for a moment. Followed Namjoon's orders. I didn't only give Jungkook the pain, but transferred it directly from you to him. Jin huffed. That's why you were so exhausted, Yoongi chuckled. Yes, it's required more depth than just giving him pain, but I recovered quickly. Now it was your turn to be confused. Wait. You gained the demon's attention. So if you guys don't know what exactly Yoongi did, you don't all speak the demon language? Kai, Yoongi corrected you. No, I'm the only one. You frowned. Why? I mean, aren't all of you able to? You looked at Jimin. Control your powers quite well? The older demon shot the silver-haired devil a short glance as well. You mean, apart from Namjoon? He dryly commented, earning a silent gasp from Jimin and a shocked glance from Jimin. Even you, remembering Jimin's earlier explanations, expected Namjoon to break through the door in pure rage any second, but the house stayed silent. Yoongi ignored the shocked reactions and turned towards you to answer your question for real. Sure, most of us are capable of controlling our power quite well, he said. But control has nothing to do with how you phrase things. Control has something to do with how well you know yourself and your limits, and how well you can implement that knowledge during the active use of magic, if you will. Being able to phrase things give you more power, yes, and more diverse ways of using it as well, but it doesn't help with the basic usage of the power that's been given you already. He looked at you. That's why everyone is able to use their powers. Even if I'm the only one speaking Kai, which, his lips curled into a smile, has mostly to do with the fact that I was the only one of us who was living around other high-ranked demons also speaking Kai during my earlier years of existence. Why didn't you teach them then? He inquired further. Yoongi's eyes wandered off to the other two, who averted their glances elsewhere. Kai is a difficult language, he replied quietly. If it wasn't for the fact that we already have one rampant demon down here, if there were 5 others trying to figure out this powerful demonic language, we'd be dead within days. Don't get me wrong, I would teach them, but not when we are confined in this cave. It's too dangerous. You cocked your head to the side. You said you only learned it during your earlier years of existence of Mia. Jin interrupted, seeming a bit tired. Yoongi is thousands of years old. His early years might as well mean a century or 2 or 3 or 10. That's more than enough to learn demonic. Jimin nodded. But we don't have that kind of time, he hummed. We've been here for... what was it again? Yoongi's lips twitched. 246 years, 171 days and 13 hours. Jin threw the elder a glance. You counted? Yoongi nodded. Every minute. Jimin turned towards you again. Anyway, it's not enough time. Enough space to learn Kai properly. So we decided not to. A smile flickered over his face. For our own safety. Don't you get sick of this? It slipped past your lips before you could do something about it. Don't you, want to die sometimes? Watching the demons, all of their faces softened until they seemed almost vulnerable. They exchanged short glances, then all 3 of them looked at you. Of course. Yoongi hummed. A long time ago, admitted Jin, and Jimin simply nodded yes, eyes glued to the ground. You felt sympathy and compassion welling up inside you. I'm sorry, you said softly. I'm sorry for what's been done to you guys. The 3 of them jokingly raised their heads and stared at you. You're sorry? Jimin's voice was rough, as if it took him a great deal of energy to speak. You simply nodded and their eyes widened even more. Until suddenly a sincere smile spread on Yoongi's face and something like fondness flickered in his eyes. You are a weird human, Mia. And then the demon slid off the sofa and kneeled down on the carpet, bowing his head in front of you. The others were speechless at the elder's reaction when he raised his head again and looked at you with an amused sparkle in his eyes. Thank you for your sympathy, my lady. What are you doing? You flinched and hesitantly turned around when Namjoon entered the room. The demons didn't seem surprised, probably because they heard him coming, but to your human ears, the steps of a demon were nearly inaudible. Yoongi looked up and slowly rose from the ground. Namjoon, he greeted, coldly mustering the leader. Namjoon approached the sofa, eyes flickering over the 3 other demons' faces. You kneeled? He then turned to the older. In front of a human? His words were sharp like spearheads, but you couldn't tell if it was because of disgust or surprise. Jin and Jimin lowered their glances, but Yoongi stood straight. His left hand loosely rested on the armrest of the sofa right next to you, and he stared right back at Namjoon. Yes, he admitted calmly, seeming not the least impressed with the leader's intimidating aura. I did. Namjoon's jaw muscles twitched as he apparently controlled himself. And? He asked, voice now soft like fresh snow and still just as cold at the same time. What was the occasion? Yoongi blinked. You heard it. He stood up against Namjoon. There's no need to explain. A slight tremble ran through the ground and the walls of the castle. Even you could feel it, and he threw Yoongi a concerned glance. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles as an answer. Don't you worry, he mumbled. I want to hear it from you still. Namjoon pressed out, anger about Yoongi's opposition now glistening in his eyes. Now. The elder noticed how Jimin and Jin looked at him with worry and thus gave him with a sigh. She apologized, he quietly stated. She felt sorry for us, for this. Namjoon huffed. And you bowed? Because of that? Next to the anger in his eyes, there was something else that made your heart sink when you saw it. He stepped up to you and the three, and out of the corners of your eyes you noticed how Yoongi shifted ever so slightly as if he was preparing to shield you from Namjoon's wrath any time. The leader's eyes were now resting on you, a storm raging in them. She is a human, he said silently. She's so emotional, so weak, so susceptible to influence. His glance flickered towards Yoongi, who with a stone-cold face and tensed-up muscles still stood beside you. Of course he had noticed how the older demon was willing to protect you from his anger. And you bow in front of her because of that? Yoongi opened his mouth to reply, but instead a clear voice filled the room, and only when all four of the devils looked at you in surprise did you realize that it was your own. How are emotions a weakness? For a moment the tension in the air grew so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Namjoon tensed up and so did Yoongi next to you, ducking the slightest bit as if ready to jump in front of you, but then he relaxed and straightened his back again. And the next second, so did Namjoon. Still his voice sounded strained when he replied, "What?" It wasn't a question, but for once it seemed like he didn't know what else to say. With Yoongi relatively calm next to you, you mustered the courage to answer. Why is it a sign of weakness? You repeated your question. If anything, doesn't it make us strong? You paused shortly when there was a movement in the shadowy darkness of the entrance hall. It was Jungkook, accompanied by Taeyong, who stood in front of the door and apparently listened to the conversation. Namjoon didn't seem to notice, but Jungkook's figure still a bit slumped gave you an idea. How about Jungkook? You continued softly. The pain he felt? He seemed much worse than ever me and I. You rubbed over your chest at the thought. I lost a piece of myself. You looked at Namjoon. Isn't that because he's not used to it? Because he doesn't know true pain or the emotions that bring pain? You tried to smile, but it turned out weak. Sure, we break easily. Because our bodies are so fucking fragile and soft. You gripped from your hand and you could have me dead, but emotionally, your chin forward definitely. I'm stronger than you. Silence filled the room while your words vanished in the air. The doorway was empty. Jungkook seemed to have left again and Namjoon stood in the middle of the room and stared at you. His fists were clenched and his whole body tensed up, and his eyes glowed a furious red. Humans. He then hissed, voice rough and deep with fury, always thinking they are something better. His glance was laced with pure wrath when he raised his head. Just you wait how much stronger you really are, human girl. And then with a movement of his hand he vanished into nothingness. The lights in the room darkened for only a second, but then everything turned normal again and you were only alone with the three others. Jin was the first to move, leaning against the chimney and chuckling. Well, that was interesting, he hummed while eyeing you. Yoongi was right. You are a weird human. Weird but good. Jimin added almost shyly, sitting down on the sofa, and Yoongi took a step back. All of them seemed genuinely relieved, but now that Namjoon was gone, your adrenaline kicked in and you started to shiver. You stared into the flames of the chimney fire and pulled the blanket tighter around your shoulders when goosebumps formed on your skin. Oh my god, you whispered to yourself, realizing what you had done. He's going to kill me. He's going to... Yoongi interrupted, who started to laugh quietly. Rest assured, Mia, he said with a mysterious sparkle in his eyes, resting his hand on your shoulder and giving it a gentle squeeze. I'm pretty sure he's going to do everything but that. His glance rested on the spot where Namjoon had stood earlier, and a smile tugged at his lips. But when you and the other two looked at him questioningly, he just shook his head and chuckled. No, I'm not gonna spoil anything. Plus, I'm not 100% sure either. He said and turned to Jin. Didn't you prepare some dinner earlier? With Jin leaving for the kitchen and Yoongi excusing himself soon after, he quickly forgot about what happened and the mysterious words of the older demon. A certain devil in this room on the second floor, however, couldn't pacing around in his chamber relentlessly. Humans. Humans. He tried to hiss, but it came out sounding soft and almost fond instead of hateful. Time skipped. He woke up on the sofa after what felt like it had been a long, exhausting sleep. The chimney fire had burned down and nothing but the red glimmer of the last ashes lit the dark room. The house was quiet, as if all the demons had gone to rest as well. Even if you assumed that they didn't sleep, you freed yourself from the blankets that one of them must have draped around you and set your feet on the stone ground. You could very well rested, and sitting around doing nothing would just cause the memories of what happened before to whirl around in your head again. So you got up to get yourself something to drink. You entered the kitchen to find it deserted. Jin was nowhere to be seen. You searched the cupboards one by one until you found a glass, then filled it with water and leaned against the kitchen island. Kitchens always had a calming effect on you, and you weirdly enjoyed standing barefooted on the cold ground in a quiet house, drinking water and for once thinking of nothing. For the first time, you were actually inspecting the room more closely. The kitchen was rustic, wood and stone dominating the interior. Even if the dishes seemed more modern than that, there were herbs growing in a few pots on one of the countertops. Inexplicably so because of the lack of sunlight, but you suspected it was some form of spell Jin used to keep them alive. You stepped closer and extended your hand, rubbing some basil leaves between your fingertips and stroking over a small bush of rosemary. The feel of something real, something worldly, made your heart ache. But the pain vanished when you turned to your right and, nipping from your water, you were aware of an old photograph that was stuck to one of the wall cupboards. It showed a group of young men, and only when you took a closer look at the blotchy, yellowed picture did you realize it was actually the demons. You couldn't help but small chuckle. All of them looked like the exact depiction of their character. Yoongi cold and distanced, Jungkook with obvious curiosity and slight discomfort, Taeyong bored, Jin stiff but not unfriendly, Hoseok with a wide smile yet a sharp spark in his eyes, Jimin also with a smile, just a more reserved one, and Diamond on his arm, and finally Namjoon. Stern expression, crossed arms, and dark, dark eyes. You found your glance resting on the letter long than intended, and quickly averted your eyes elsewhere, just to nearly drop your glass in shock when you saw Jungkook leaning in the door frame and watching you. You quietly cursed, extending your trembling hand to set the glass down safely on one of the countertops. Surprised me? Jungkook flinched ever so slightly and finally looked away, apparently finding a large interest in his toes. Sorry, he mumbled. I didn't intend to sneak up on you. You noticed the large dark circles under his eyes and stepped a bit closer. Are you okay? You asked, true worry making your heart clench. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Jungkook looked up again with a firm glance. Thank you for your concern. He replied, then huffed with a bitter laugh. I'm recovering. Yoongi is strong. He rubbed his chest absent-mindedly. I'm sure he held back, but no one dares to fully defy Namjoon's orders. He kept quiet for a while, fighting down feelings of guilt and compassion. I hope you'll be feeling better soon. You finally answered, forcing a weak smile onto your face and quickly swallowed the words. At least you didn't lose a part of your soul. Still, Jungkook seemed to know what you were thinking because he turned away a little and ran his fingers through his messy hair with obvious distress. You know, he finally broke the silence again, his voice sounding strained. I should apologize too for that attack on you the other day. His hand dropped to his side and he sighed, facing you again through his tensed pose, and his hunched shoulders gave away how much he hated it. I shouldn't have. He seemed at loss of words, and you felt bad for him, how he just stood there seeming like a little boy who apologized for stealing chocolate, so you decided to interrupt. It's too late now, you replied. Shrugging, although the squeeze in your chest proved that it was indeed not as okay as you made it out to be. It can't be changed. I won't make a fuss over it, and I won't blame you for. You hesitated and took a deep breath. For your natural behaviors, it's okay. Jungkook watched you with obvious surprise and doubt, but his voice was clear when he replied, It's not okay, Mia, and I'm angry with myself because it is my natural behavior, not despite of it. He stepped forward and rested his palm on one of the cold surfaces as if he had to remind himself that this was real. It's not like I love being a demon, but it's not like I had a choice either. He spat out those words with so much bitterness that again you sympathized with him. What happened to all of you? You murmured softly, realizing that all of the devils seemed broken in one way or another, and every single one of them dealt with it in their own way. Some for better, some for worse. Jungkook ignored your comment and stared at his hand as if he couldn't bear to look you in the eye. Not everyone is born to be a devil, he said quietly as if he spoke to himself. But me? I seem to fail to adjust fully. He looked up and suddenly there was something like pain in his eyes. I'm envious, he admitted, voice so close to breaking you nearly expected tears to run down his face. Envious of you, envious of humans who have emotions, feelings, who have pain and all the feelings and fleetings of joy in their life to dwell in. He raised his hand from the countertop. I envy those who can die. He finished his monologue. He didn't look up immediately, but suddenly two warm hands entered his field of vision, engulfed his cold one, and when he raised his head, he was met with two warm, friendly eyes and a small smile when you looked at him. No judgment, despise, or shock evident in your expression, and softly said, It's nice to meet you, Envy.